Hey guys, have you ever heard about the case of David Allen Westerfield? He lived in San Diego. He was a neighbor of this little girl. Her name was Danielle Nicole van Dam. Danielle Nicole van Dam was just 7 years old when she was taken from her bedroom by this creepy old neighbor. He was 49 years old at the time. He snuck into her house while her father and her two little brothers were sleeping right in the house. And he took her from her bed. He snuck out of the house. He transported her in some sort of a Toyota 4Runner or something. Whatever exactly that is, I'm not sure. I mean, I know what it is, but I'm not sure. I think it was some sort of a, ATV, not an actual car, obviously. Anyway, he transferred her to his motorhome, which he kept somewhere other than right at his house. And then he took her body out into the desert and he murdered her. There are a couple of interesting twists to this story. The creepo neighbor actually knew her parents, her mother, and just a few days before she was murdered, she and her mother knocked on his door to sell him Girl Scout cookies. Isn't that creepy? And then her mother wanted to see his kitchen because she knew that he had remodeled the kitchen, so Danielle and her mother went right inside this creep's house and checked out the fancy new kitchen. This guy didn't have any criminal record at all. He was a successful engineer who worked from home. And he actually owned quite a few patents for medical equipment. He also had something like 67,000 pornographic images on his computer. After he was convicted, I think it was like a year after he was convicted, there was a man named James Selby who wrote out a confession to the murder of Danielle. He was in jail at the time in Colorado, waiting, I think, to be transported to Arizona to face attempted murder charges in a totally unrelated case. Nobody ever followed up on that confession, and James Selby actually committed suicide in his cell. Kind of made me wonder about the Darlie Routier case, though, because that James Selby sounds like he was quite the monster, too. I don't know. Just a thought if the Darlie lovers want to start barking up that tree. And the guy killed himself, so that would be a good one to blame it on, right? But back to this case. One of the detectives who arrived at the scene shortly after Danielle's mother called the police, I think it was around 9 o'clock in the morning that Danielle's mother dialed 911. Well, around 9:30 or so, maybe even a little bit after that. One of the detectives that arrived at the scene noticed how well kept David Chesterfield's lawn was, how his home and his yard just seemed so perfect. But she also noticed that there was a garden hose that was left sprawled out all on the lawn, not rolled up and put away. And that caught her attention. She thought, like, who would do that, right? If they're so meticulous about taking care of their things. And she knew it in her gut right then and there that whoever lived in that house was the killer. She told the other guys her hunch, and they listened. She had a lot of good experience, and they respected her opinions. And her supervisor told her to go ahead and follow her hunch. She spent hours with the creepy monster when he returned back to his house. And he was actually like hitting on her and even suggesting that the two of them might go out for dinner together. She talked to him about taking a lie detector test, and he said yes. And he failed it. He provided a lot of details for the officers about where he had been with his motorhome. But there's one detail he didn't mention, and that is that before he came back home, before he got back to the house, that he had stopped off at the dry cleaners to drop off the comforter and a couple of pillowcases and his jacket too. And as it turned out, his jacket had blood on it that belonged to little Danielle. The monster is in San Quentin on death row. Probably still appealing the conviction, who knows? His first appeal was, of course, turned down, but you know how that works. They keep right on appealing anyway. What a sad story. My goodness, this little girl went to bed safe and sound. Her father said that he put her to bed at about 10:30 that night. Her mother was out partying at the bars, and here's another creepy part of this story. The creepy neighbor, Chesterfield, he was out at the bars the week before, and he ran into little Danielle's mother. And then when Danielle and her mother stopped by to sell the Girl Scout cookies to him, he said something to her about seeing her out at the bars and asking why she didn't introduce him to her friends. And then she went ahead and told him that she and her friends would be out again the next Friday if she could find a sitter, I think is what she said, for Danielle. So when the Friday night came, the creepy monster went out to the bar, and sure enough, he saw Danielle's mom and her friends. And then he left the bar a short time after that. When Danielle's mom and her friends got home at about 2 in the morning, Danielle's mother noticed that the home security system light was flashing. She and her friends and her husband evidently stayed up for about a half an hour before the friends left, and Danielle's parents went to bed. And then, like I said before, when they got up in the morning, evidently around 9 o'clock, they discovered that Danielle was missing from her bedroom. So how creepy is that? Just think of how long that jerk was planning to kidnap and murder this poor little girl. It's so disgusting. Oh my gosh. I really don't believe in the death penalty, but in cases like this, I say have at it.